The Freljord is a harsh and unforgiving place, where the people are born warriors, who must persevere against all odds. Proud and fiercely independent, the tribes of the Freljord are often considered wild, rugged, and uncivilized by their neighbors across Valoran, who do not know the ancient traditions that shape them. Many thousands of years ago, the alliance between the sisters of Erosa, Sejuani, and Lissandra was shattered in a war that unknowingly threatened all of Runeterra, plunging the northern lands into chaos and near-constant winter. Now, only those truly exceptional mortals who seem immune to the ravages of fire or ice seem destined or able to lead. Despite the best efforts of the Frostguard, myths and legends still endure of the old gods, the enigmatic Yetis and restless spirit walker shamans. The raiders of the Winter's Claw range further with each passing year, harrying the borders of Demacia to the south and the frontiers of Noxus to the east. Finally, seeking a more peaceful future, the fractious independent tribes and clans have begun to offer their allegiance to Ashe, young queen of the Evorisons. Even so, the portents are grim. War is surely returning to the Freljord, and none can hope to escape it. Anivia, the Cryophoenix. To those who venerate her, she is the elemental soul of the Freljord, a symbol of hope and a sacred catalyst of change. Stories passed down through the ages often tell of how she rewards those who are kind and humble. Anshiar, as this Rariant toots, is a one-all with a noble of ice, Rariat Ond of the mortal of dirt, mortal bar of ice, of greed, of el, await, abound, a tox. The songs of the nomadic Notai tribe tell how Anivia's birth first brought snow into the world. When she burst from her giant egg of ice, tiny pieces of it were hurled into the sky, and it has fallen as snow ever since. And, according to the sagas of the Morncrow tribe, the frigid winds that scour the Freljord originate from the first beats of her wings. Indeed, the full power of winter is Anivia's to command, and to those who seek to desecrate her homeland, she is a bitter foe. When roused to anger, she can cleave fortresses and mountains, and her screech can summon blizzards cold enough to shatter steel. One of the most enduring and respected beliefs is that Anivia's greatest gift to the Freljord was the creation of true ice. Infused with elemental magic, this unmelting substance is pure and potent, and the greatest seers and ice mages have long strived to use shards of true ice to amplify their might, while weapons that have even a tiny sliver forged into them are deadly beyond belief. When mortals first arrived in the Freljord, Anivia welcomed them. Seeing that they could not withstand the cold, she guided them to secluded valleys where they could shelter, become established, and slowly harden themselves against the elements. She nurtured and watched over them for those first precarious centuries, and they, in turn, worshipped her. Anivia hoped that these newly arrived tribes would remain unified in defending the Freljord from outsiders. But slowly, infighting and blood feuds became all too common, making an invasion inevitable. According to legend, a greedy southern king marched his warriors up through the mountains, seeking to claim dominion over the Northlands and shackle their wild magic for himself. So enraged was Anivia at the outsiders' hubris and disrespect that she blasted them with a snowstorm that lasted a century and a day. Scattered standing stones can still be seen on the scouring plain, which the locals claim are all that remain of that ancient army. Other tales include the Avarosan legend of Ula Shatterspear, an iceborn Warmhother who was favored by Anivia for saving a young hawk from a Rimefang wolf. Across her lifetime, the Cryophoenix protected Ula from harm, and when she finally fell in battle, having witnessed almost 100 winters, it is said that Anivia welcomed her with wings spread wide. If all these legends are true, then Anivia must have witnessed the rise and fall of countless mortal civilizations. While there are still some dwindling remnants of those earlier times, most have long been forgotten and buried beneath millennia of ice. But death cannot touch Anivia herself. The sagas speak of how she has been struck down and slain a handful of times throughout history, though she is always reborn, for as long as the Freljord exists, her soul is immortal. While it may be hundreds or even thousands of years before she rises again, each rebirth coincides with the dawning of a new era. Thus, her appearance, while regarded as a wondrous blessing, is often the harbinger of something terrible on the horizon. Once, it is said, she sacrificed herself against a march of towering Balestriders. Anivia knew she could not slay these colossal creatures, and so she plunged into the ice beneath their feet, shattering her own body in order to entomb them. Recently, some claim Anivia has hatched from the egg once more, and that she has appeared before the new leader of the Avarosans, the War Mother Ashe. In her, perhaps Anivia sees one who may be able to finally reunite the Freljord. Yet if the Cryophoenix has indeed returned, as more and more shamans and spirit walkers proclaim, then it must be asked, what great threat has she come to face? Ashe. Ashe hails from the northern Freljord, where brutal tribal raids and interclan warfare are as much a part of the landscape as the scream of the frozen winds and the unyielding cold of the tundra. Everyone assumed that Ashe would follow her mother as the tribe's next leader. However, this was never a glory Ashe desired. The grim responsibility of her warlike lineage and extraordinary gifts instead left Ashe feeling isolated, burdened, and alone. Her only respite was when Sejuani, an iceborn girl from a sister tribe, would stay with them for the summer hunts around the Ornkarl rocks. The girls' friendship defined their childhoods, but was cut short just as they reached their teens. Somehow, Gnar had offended Sejuani's grandmother, and the fellowship between their tribes ended suddenly. Soon after, with her youth fleeting, Ashe's mother began her lifelong quest for the throne of Avarosa, a supposed hoard of treasures and magical items that she hoped would return her people to greatness. But Grna's belief in prophecies and legends led her to take risks, which often left her tribe enfeebled. Finally, during a dangerous and unnecessary raid in another tribe's lands, Gnar was killed. Her sudden death left young Ashe on the run, while most of her tribe was wiped out. Alone, pursued, Ashe followed her mother's last map to a deserted glacier, where she found the supposed grave of Avarosa and her magical bow of true ice. Ashe used the weapon to avenge her mother's death, then turned west. Whether it was out of duty or loneliness, Ashe gained a reputation by protecting the many scattered half-bound tribes she encountered. She spurned the custom of taking thralls, and instead chose to adopt these desperate people as full members of her new tribe, and her fame grew quickly. Soon many began to believe that she did not just carry the weapon of Avarosa. Ashe was the legend herself, reborn and destined to reunite the Freljord. But tall tales would not feed her followers, and their long march south left the tribe on the verge of starvation. So, Ashe leveraged the myths surrounding her, using them to form alliances with the powerful and land-rich southern tribes, promising to unite them into a nation capable of challenging neighboring kingdoms. These new alliances brought new dangers, and Ashe quickly found herself at the center of a political feud. A war mother, as Freljordian tribal leaders are known, was expected to wed, and taking a husband from one of the major tribes would anger the others. Ashe could take several husbands, but this would only bring the conflict to a boil within her own household, and the ensuing bloodshed would shatter the alliances she had fought to build. Her answer was an impoverished vagabond from a mountain clan that had been nearly wiped out, the warrior Tryndamere. He was neither a spirit walker nor blessed with any elemental powers, but upon his arrival in Ashe's new capital, Tryndamere had thrown himself into every dueling ring he could find. He fought with abandon, desperate to prove the destitute survivors of his clan were worthy of adoption by one of the stronger tribes. But even for the Freljord, his brutal fighting style and extraordinary vitality were unsettling, and many suspected he was touched by dark magic. Ignoring this, Ashe offered to adopt his people as her own if he became her first and only blood swan. Tryndamere accepted reluctantly. Though a political marriage, the attraction they felt for each other was palpable, and slowly, a true affection blossomed. Now, Ashe stands at the head of the largest coalition of Freljordian tribes in many generations. Even so, the unity she would bring rests upon an uneasy peace, threatened by internal intrigues, foreign powers, the growing violent horde of the Winter's Claw, and a supposed destiny that Ashe must at least pretend to believe. Allura, the witch between worlds. Deep in the frozen tundra of the Freljord, there is a vast dea who lives in a blended world of her own. Aurora was born in the secluded village of Amu, home to the Briny tribe, and spent her youth playing with critters no one else could see, while exploring a world no one else could appreciate. Though she was happy, she felt isolated from the rest of Amu. Even her parents didn't understand her, believing Aurora's friends were merely imaginary. The only Briny who wholeheartedly embraced Aurora was her great-aunt Havu, who always entertained her stories, fostered her passions, and encouraged her to celebrate her individuality. So Aurora learned to be herself and revel in her own company. As more of B2 best to make her things, ARP objects, colorful treat makers, and fruits to hear of match the magic, or felt when their things catching invisible. The beautiful, vibrant world she lived in was completely unique, for only her eyes could pierce through the veil between the realm of mortals and spirits. She meticulously documented this intertwined world, studying Amu's spirits in hopes of helping others understand the realms as she saw them. Over time, more and more spirits appeared in Amu, including ones who felt different. Lost and wild, they had become wayward when the balance between realms was disturbed by mortal affairs. But after investigating this phenomenon, Aurora discovered she could help these spirits return home by getting to the root of their pain. This was difficult work, but in it, Aurora found her life's purpose. She knew that continuing her research meant she had to explore the world outside of Amu. Though the idea of change made her nervous, the prospect of expanding her knowledge inspired Aurora to leave her home behind. It was during her travels that she encountered a wayward spirit who took the form of a monstrous, twisted elk. He was feral and afraid, lashing out with blood-stained antlers. Aurora was determined to calm him down, and though it took time, she earned his trust. But this spirit was unlike the others. With every attempt to help him, Aurora failed. Undeterred, she convinced the afflicted elk to travel with her, using her powers to tuck him away in the spirit realm as she worked to unravel his mystery. Having come across a number of spirit walkers as she traversed the Freljord, Aurora sought their advice, believing their ability to channel spirits may shed some light on what plagued her wayward companion. However, they too were at a loss, suggesting she find Udyr, the tundra's most powerful spirit walker. Udyr needed just one look to recognize the immense power of Aurora's spirit friend, but the fearsome elk was too lost to commune with. Instead, he encouraged her to ask the demigods for answers. Aurora decided to first search for the great Ram, Orn. She traveled far through ice and snow to study the artifacts of his followers, the Half-Blood, hoping to learn where they had worshipped him. Using her ability to open a doorway between realms, she stepped inside and was met with the great hall of Orm's Forge, alive with roaring fire. Oren was not receptive to his new visitor, but in time he realized that she, like him, valued solitude and quiet. As he grew to trust her, Oren finally shared the name of Aurora's companion, Hestria. One of Oren's siblings, Eschog, as he was once commonly called, was originally a powerful demigod. But with the waning worship of the old gods, many demigods had lost their identities and become distorted shadows of who they once were. This revelation about her wayward friend brought Aurora one step closer to helping him find his way home, but there was still a long journey ahead of her. From Orn she learned about Yashan, the cryo-phoenix who guides and protects the land, while enduring an eternal cycle of birth, life, and death. And, though painful, Orn also spoke of his brother Valhyr, whose relentless storm rages against the Freljord in his desperation to quench the Voriod's bloodlust with the rains of war. Believing these demigods hold the key to Hastralclick's recovery, Aurora has left Hearthhome and now traverses through the material and spirit realms of her frozen homeland in unwavering pursuit of their knowledge. Braum, the heart of the Freljord. Even as a child, Braum was much larger than other Freljordian youngsters, but his mother taught him never to use his size to intimidate or bully. She came from a proud line of herders and believed true courage lay in using one's power not to dominate, but to protect those in need. When Braum was still a boy, ice giants devastated a neighboring tribe. That tribe had long preyed upon the herds of Braum's people, but his mother didn't hesitate to head out across the tundra to help the survivors, bearing furs, foodstuffs, and healing supplies. At first, Braum didn't understand why she would aid their rivals, but after her actions saved many lives, they became lifelong allies. He finally understood what his mother meant when she said all the Freljord's people were a family, and from that day forth, he pledged to bring that family together. As Braum grew, it was clear he was one of the revered Iceborn, though even among their number, his strength and ability to endure the elements were legendary. He became a local hero, rescuing children who had slipped into icy ravines, saving travelers stranded in blizzards, and protecting families from ravaging wildclaws. Whenever he appeared, people knew help had arrived. He was a figure of hope, known for his liveliness and laughter, and the easy way he made friends. Eventually, Braum realized he was needed beyond the valleys and tundra where he'd been raised. Bidding his mother a tearful farewell, he set out to travel the Freljord. Over the years, countless stories spread of Braum's mighty feats and good deeds. While most had at least a kernel of truth, they grew increasingly far-fetched and mythic, such as the legend of how he chopped down an entire forest in a single night, using only his bare hands, or how, during a volcanic eruption, he saved an isolated farmstead by picking it up and carrying it to higher ground. A more recent tale spoke of how Braum found his immense ram-headed shield. As the story went, it was an enchanted vault door, forged in ancient times and set into a mountain. Braum heard cries from within, but he couldn't break the door down. Undeterred, he punched his way through the mountain's bare rock, rescuing a troll boy who was trapped inside. He ripped the unbreakable door off its hinges and has borne it ever since. As with many legends about him, Braum laughed uproariously when he first heard this particular tale, but far from refuting such stories, he embraces them. Why let the truth get in the way of inspiring others to acts of generosity and kindness? No matter how he actually found his shield, soon afterward Braum made his way to the sacred site of Rakilstake, where many tribes had gathered to hear the words of the Avarosan Warmother, Ashe said to be the reincarnation of Avarosa herself. There, he witnessed the barbarian Tryndamere, desperate to prove his worth, savagely beating any who would face him. As Braum watched, he saw that Tryndamere was growing increasingly unhinged. During one duel, he was so lost in his fury that it seemed certain he would kill his opponent, despite having already prevailed. Deciding things had gone far enough, Braum planted himself in front of the downed fighter, shield raised, and Tryndamere hacked and smashed against the impenetrable bulwark. When the barbarian's rage finally subsided, Braum's good humor won him over, and before long the pair were laughing and drinking to each other's health. Some even say that it was Braum who first introduced Tryndamere to Ashe. The barbarian would later marry her, becoming her only bloodsworn. Braum doesn't hold any particular tribal allegiance, for he views all within the Freljord as brothers and sisters. Even so, he sees in Ashe someone who can end the centuries-old feuding among the Freljord's tribes, and the Avarossans have informally adopted him into their number. Braum's dream, as he often tells adoring children, is that someday the Freljord will be united in one big family, and then he can retire to become a humble poro herder. Though Braum counts no one as his enemy, he has had a few run-ins with the Frost God since he started carrying his shield. He doesn't understand why they have a grudge against him, nor why they seem so interested in what he now bears. No. The missing link. Before the ice had given the Freljord its name, there existed a land brimming with wonder. That is, if one could see the world through the eyes of Gnar. A young Yordle with boundless energy, Gnar and others like him lived openly among the hardy tribes of the Northlands. Though barely big enough to leave footprints in the snow, his temper rivaled that of beasts 10 times his size, and he would erupt with a babble of curses the moment anything went amiss. For this reason, he felt more kinship with the greater and wiser creatures, who kept their distance from mortals. To Gnar, they looked like overgrown white-furred Yordles, and that was good enough for him. While the tribes foraged across the tundra, gathering wild berries and tasty moss, Gnar collected more essential items, like rocks, pebbles, and the muddy remains of dead birds. His greatest treasure was the jawbone of a Druvask. When he tugged it from the cold earth, he squealed with glee and flung it as far as he could. It landed 2 hops away. Thrilled by this early success, Gnar carried his boomerang wherever he went. The world would try its best to offer him new delights, shiny lint, sweet nectar, round things, but none could match the pure joy he felt in throwing and catching his cherished weapon. He now considered himself a hunter, and trailed herds of wild beasts that paid him no mind. But even he could sense change coming to the land. The sky seemed darker, the winds felt colder. The mortal tribes who had once foraged together now appeared to hunt each other. The big white Yordles would know what to do. Gnar would go to them. Using all of his hunting skill, he tracked them into the snow-capped peaks of a vast mountain range, much farther than he had ever wandered before. As he approached unseen, he also saw more mortals than he could count. This was exciting, but no one else seemed too happy about it. Then the ground shook and split apart. For the first time in Gnar's life, it seemed as though everyone else was throwing tantrums. The mortals yelled, the big Yordles roared, but the monster's arrival silenced them all. Heaving itself up from the newly opened abyss, it bore huge horns, whipping tentacles, and a single eye burning with strange light that made the fur on Gnar's back crawl. While some mortals fled at the sight, he began to feel an odd pain in his chest. It was like the thought of losing his boomerang, or never being hugged again. This horrible thing wanted to hurt his new friends. And this made him angry. In that moment, Gnar truly raged. All he could see was the monster. In a flash, he was in the air, leaping toward it. In one paw, he grasped a snowball, or so he thought. In fact, it was a boulder plucked from the mountainside, for Gnar had grown as large as the big white Yordles. He would send this monster back where it came from by walloping its face. But the blow never landed. Gnar felt a chill colder than any winter, one that seemed to turn the air itself into ice. Truly, his elemental magic froze him in place, biting through his shaggy fur. Everything, including the monster, became quiet. The Yordle's strength and anger melted away. A deep tiredness crept into his limbs, and he fell softly asleep. Gnar napped for a long time. When he finally awoke, he shook the frost from his shoulders, breathing heavily. Everyone else was gone. With no monsters to fight and no friends to protect, he felt very small and alone again. The land was very different too. There was snow everywhere, blanketing everything as far as his wide eyes could see. Still, he let out a happy yelp when he saw his beloved boomerang lying beside him and scurried away to find something to hunt. Even now, Gnar has no grasp of what took place that fateful day, nor how he escaped. He simply marvels at the world before him, with so many oddities to collect and places to explore. Gragas, the rabble-rouser. The only thing more important to Gragas than fighting is drinking. His unquenchable thirst for stronger ale has led him in search of the most potent and unconventional ingredients to toss in his still. Impulsive and unpredictable, this rowdy carouser loves cracking kegs as much as cracking heads. Thanks to his strange brews and temperamental nature, drinking with Gragas is always a risky proposition. Gragas has an eternal love of good drink, but his massive constitution prevented him from reaching a divine state of intoxication. One night, when he had drained all the kegs and was left wanting, Gragas was struck by a thought rather than the usual bar stool. Why couldn't he brew himself something that would finally get him truly drunk? It was then that he vowed to create the ultimate ale. Gragas's quest eventually brought him to the Freljord, where the promise of acquiring the purest Arctic water for his recipe led him into uncharted glacial wastes. While lost in an unyielding blizzard, Gragas stumbled upon a great howling abyss. There he found it, a flawless shard of ice unlike anything he had ever seen. Not only did this unmelting shard imbue his lager with incredible properties, but it also had a handy side effect. It kept the mixture chilled at the perfect serving temperature. Under the spell of his new concoction, Gragas headed for civilization, eager to share the fermented fruits of his labor. As fate would have it, the first gathering to catch Gragas's bleary eyes would shape the future of the Freljord. He blundered into a deteriorating negotiation between two tribes discussing an alliance with Ashe. Though Ashe welcomed a break in the tension, the other warriors bristled at the intrusion and hurled insults at the drunken oaf. True to his nature, Gragas replied with a diplomatic headbutt, setting off a brawl matched only in the legends of the Freljord. When the fallen from that great melee finally awoke, Ashe proposed a friendly drink as an alternative to fighting. With their tempers doused in suds, the two tribes, formerly on the brink of war, bonded over a common love of Gragas's brew. Although strife was averted and Gragas hailed a hero, he still had not achieved his dream of drunken blissfulness. So once more, he set off to wander the tundra in search of ingredients for Runeterra's perfect pint. Lissandra, the Ice Witch. In a time long forgotten, before the Sands birthed and then swallowed Shurima, beings of old magic freely walked Runeterra. The borders between the mortal realm and what lay beyond it were hotly contested. Into this dangerous and volatile age, Lissandra and her sisters, Sejuani and Avarosa, were born. Each sought to harness the powers at war, and each paid a terrible price. Attempting to command the heavens above them, Sejuani lost her voice to the first twilight. Avarosa faced the twisting dark beneath the world, and was deafened by its emptiness, waiting to consume all creation. It was Lissandra who stood against the wild magic of the mortal world itself. For this defiance, the savage claws of a primal god raked across her eyes, blinding her. Though each sister had lost a part of themselves, it was on the frozen fields of Lissandra's many battles that they were able to unite and prevail. Together, they were unstoppable. But even a bond of blood could only weather so much. With her sight taken, Lissandra chose instead to walk in dreams. Ashe had the... Unknown to her sisters, Lissandra struck a deal on their behalf with the godlike entities she had communed with. The Watchers would grant them near immortality in exchange for preparing Runeterra for the coming of the Void. The three sisters and their most powerful followers were named Iceborn. Those with this ability to withstand the worst of the numbing frost would be spared until the very end. However, Lissandra's sisters grew displeased. Avarosa argued that the only thing worse than death was servitude. Even Sejuani bristled against what would become of the world they had fought so hard for. Caught in the middle, Lissandra tried to soothe her sister's concerns while appealing to the Watchers for more time. But the unknowable nothingness cared not for such platitudes. The void erupted into the mortal world in the far north, and with it, Lissandra's hidden allegiance to the Watchers became undeniable. In that moment, her only choices were to let all the world be consumed, or to give up what she cared for most. Lissandra sacrificed her sisters and the allies they had gathered, entombing the Watchers beneath a glacial barrier of magical ice that could never be melted. Lissandra soon discovered that even this elemental power was not enough. The monstrous beings she had frozen were merely slumbering, slowly tainting the true ice around them into something darker. Now, they wandered through Lissandra's dreams as easily as she had theirs. And always she would wake, terrified, professing her loyalty to the chilling eternity they promised. Ever the survivor, she gathered her remaining followers to venerate her and her departed sisters. If true ice would delay the inevitable end of all things, then they had to gather as much of it as they could find, and scour the frozen lands for any of Iceborn descent to join their cause. Lissandra and the first among her Frostguard did everything in their power to rewrite history, seizing all records of what had truly happened, and yet rumors and prophecies persisted in myth and song. It was whispered that Avarosa and Sejuani would one day return to unite the disparate tribes, and so Lissandra had any who were hailed as their reincarnations quietly killed. Even she retreated into the shadows, periodically renewing herself with the powers she had been gifted. Like the threat that lies trapped beneath the ice, Lissandra has never been able to completely control her sister's legends. Whether from guilt or arrogance, her failure to eradicate their legacy has manifested once more in two powerful Iceborn, one an idealist, the other a conqueror, and now, between them, they lead many tribes within the Freljord. Lissandra watches them carefully, seeking any opportunity to pit them against one another, all the while redoubling her own efforts to lock away the terrible secrets she has buried deep under her citadel. And she must hurry, for the ice is beginning to melt. Nunu and Willump, the boy and his yeti. One of the Notai, a nomadic tribe that long traveled the Freljord, Nunu learned from his mother, Leica, that behind everything is a story. Together, they gathered tales that Leica turned into songs. For Nunu, nothing was better than journeying from village to village, hearing his mother sing of ancient heroes. With music and dance, the Notai brought one last celebration to everyone they met, as each winter's chill set in. Riding the wave of frost spilling from Anivia's wings, his heart beating the rhythm of a jubilant song, Nunu's world was full of possibility. On his 5th name day, Leica gave Nunu a special gift, a flute, so he could learn to play her melodies himself. In one had be sure of but, if Leif claimed the truth of garden shaped for two. When the caravan was attacked by raiders, Nunu was separated from his mother. Though he was dragged to safety by the surviving Notai, he was left to wonder what had happened to Leica, waiting to hear her songs on the wind. Snow fell. Weeks passed. Knots weren't been by else his name. Had the hair were to had he name Yule of even. A four but the name had up. One to take one, than one mighty one. Nunu spent more and more time alone, escaping into his mother's songs, the legends and heroes of old. He yearned to be one of these heroes, perhaps even a great warrior like the Frost Guard, who could have saved his mother. He even met their leader, Lissandra, who asked countless questions about his mother's stories, always seeking information about one particular song. No one believed he could be a hero, not even the other Notai children, who teased him for his flute when they now had daggers. But Nunu knew the songs in his heart, and one night he realized how he could prove himself and persuade the others to help to find his mother. From the tribe's fearful whispers, he'd learned of a fierce monster that killed all who sought its power, thwarting the local hunters who were sent each year, never to return. There was a psalm that Nunu's mother sang, one that he now couldn't seem to stop singing to himself. Suddenly, Nunu understood what he had to do. He could name the beast. It would answer his challenge and feel the wrath of Svalsonga. Using his flute to tame a herd of Elkir, Nunu snuck out into the snow. One lonely child traveled to face a monster, finally living out a legend that not even he could imagine. An ancient and noble race that once ruled over the mountains of the Freljord, the Yeti civilization, was destroyed glad careless, glad tears, frozen canned. Foray, one opinion to Ofin, one to the Street of Sense. One of Street, one, yet, 900. As the last magical Yeti, the Guardian was also shaped by perception. Though he had been chosen to safeguard the magic until it would be needed again, he could find no worthy vessel. The men who intruded upon his ruined home had only malice in their hearts, and so a monster greeted them with fang and claw. But the Guardian knew he was forgetting something: his name. And the names of those he had loved. Once, there had been song. That all changed when a young boy stumbled into the ruins. After centuries of unbroken vigil, the monster was prepared to end the boy's life, snarling as he sensed the human approach. Unexpectedly, the gem brought forth images of heroes slaying dragons and beheading ancient serpents from the boy's mind. The child roared, drawing his flute like a fearsome sword. But the blow never came, for even as the boy saw visions of heroes swirling around him, he realized the deeper truths of the songs his mother sang. When he looked at the Guardian, he didn't see a monster. He saw someone who needed a friend. Still enraged, the Yeti did not expect the first snowball to the face, or the second. Snowball fight, in anger, then shock, then joy. The Guardian joined in, shaped not by fear, but by a child's imagination. He was growing furrier and friendlier. His growl was becoming a laugh, until the beast accidentally broke the boy's flute. As the child began to cry, the Guardian felt a kindred grief take shape around the gem. For centuries, he had looked into it and seen the end of his people, the threat they had buried, betrayal by the Blind One. And now, instead, he saw a caravan burning. He heard a voice on the wind. He sensed something else within the boy, something he had never felt from a human, not even the three sisters who had come to him long ago. It was love, fighting back despair. In that moment, the Guardian knew the Freljord's only hope lay in the power already within this child. The magic he'd been guarding was a tool. What truly mattered was the heart that would shape it. With a gesture, the magic passed from the gem into the boy, giving him the ability to make his imagination real, to repair his flute, freezing it in dreams that hardened into true ice, to imagine a best friend named Willump. Escaping into the Freljordian plains, Nunu's heart and Willump's strength now enable the pair to do what they never could alone, to have an adventure. Following the songs of Nunu's mother, they snowball wildly from one place to the next, holding on to the hope that she is still out there, somewhere. But Willump knows that with magic and dreams come responsibility. One day the games will end as the dark ice at the heart of the Freljord thaws, and thaws Olaf, the berserker. Most men would say that death is a thing to be feared. None of those men would be Olaf. The berserker lives only for the roar of a battle cry and the clash of steel. Spurred on by his hunger for glory and the looming curse of a forgettable death, Olaf throws himself into every fight with reckless abandon. Surrendering to the bloodlust deep within his being, Olaf is only truly alive when grappling with the jaws of death. The coastal peninsula of Lokfar is among the most brutal places in the Freljord. There, rage is the only fire to warm frozen bones. Blood is the only liquid that flows freely, and there is no worse fate than to grow old, frail, and forgotten. Olaf was a warrior of Lokfar with no shortage of glories and no hesitation to share them. While boasting one evening with his clansmen over the burning embers of a razed village, one of the elder warriors grew tired of Olaf's bluster. The old fighter goaded Olaf to read the omens and see if Olaf's fortunes matched his gloating. Emboldened by the challenge, Olaf mocked the aged raider's envy and tossed the knucklebones of a long-dead beast to predict the heights of glory he'd achieve in death. All mirth left the gathering as the clansmen read the portents. The bones spoke of a long life and a quiet passing. Infuriated, Olaf stormed into the night, determined to prove the prediction false by finding and slaughtering Lokfar's feared frost serpent. The monster had consumed thousands, man and ship alike, in its long lifetime, and to die in battle with it would be a fitting end for any warrior. As Olaf hurled himself into the blackness of its maw, he fell deeper into the blackness of his mind. When the shock of freezing water roused him from the dark, there was only the butchered carcass of the beast afloat beside him. Thwarted but not defeated, Olaf set out to hunt down every legendary creature with claws and fangs, hoping that the next battle would be his last. Each time he charged headlong toward his coveted death, only to be spared by the frenzy that washed over him while on its brink. Olaf concluded that no mere beast could grant him a warrior's death. His solution was to take on the most fearsome tribe in the Freljord, the Winter's Claw. Sejuani appeared amused by Olaf's challenge to her warband, but his audacity would earn him no mercy. She ordered the charge and sent scores of her warriors to overwhelm Olaf. One by one, they fell until he lost himself in the bloodlust once again, effortlessly cutting a path to the leader of the Winter's Claw. The clash between Olaf and Sejuani rocked the glaciers with its force, and though he seemed unstoppable, Sejuani battled the berserker to a standstill. As they stood deadlocked, Sejuani's glare penetrated Olaf's berserker haze in a way no weapon ever could. His frenzy abated long enough for her to make him an offer. Sejuani swore that she would find Olaf his glorious death if he would lend his axe to her campaign of conquest. In that moment, Olaf vowed he would carve his legacy into the Freljord itself. Orn. The fire below the mountain. Or the ore. Or one must go up to 1,000, and look, who did one name town work. More than any other of his kind, Orn was said to value privacy, solitude, and focus. Beneath a dormant volcano that bore scars from some ancient eruption, he labored day and night, forging whatever his heart desired. The results were priceless tools destined for feats of legend. The lucky few who have stumbled upon these relics note their bewilderingly high quality. Some even claim that Braum's shield was made by Ornn thousands of years ago, and remains as sturdy as the day it was finished. No one can be sure, however, for none can find the Forge God to ask him. Almost all the tales of Ornn's deeds and accomplishments have been excised from history by his enemies and the slow march of time. The few that remain are remembered by the handful of tribes who can trace their lineage back to a single culture of blacksmiths, architects, and brewmasters. This long-lost populace was known as the Hearthblood, apprentices who journeyed from all corners of Valoran and gathered on the slopes of Hearthhome to follow Ornn's example. Despite this imitative form of worship, Ornn never considered himself their patron. He would only give them curt nods or frowns when they offered up their work, and yet the Hearthblood accepted this and were determined to hone their skills. As a result, they came to create the finest tools, design the sturdiest structures, and brew the tastiest ales the world had ever beheld. They believed Ornn secretly approved of their perseverance, and the fact that they were always looking to better themselves in their craft. But, in one catastrophic night, all the Hearthblood had accomplished was destroyed when Ornn battled with his brother Volibear at the mountain's peak, for reasons no mortal could comprehend. The resultant cataclysm was a storm of fire and ash and lightning, so intensely violent that it was seen 10 horizons away. When the dust settled, Hearthhome was a smouldering caldera, and the Hearthblood were reduced to scattered bones and cinders. Though he would never admit it, Ornn was devastated. Through the Hearthblood he had glimpsed the sweeping potential of mortal life, only to see it all lost beneath the indiscriminate wrath of his immortal struggle. Racked with guilt, he retreated to the isolation of his foundry and buried himself in his work for an age. Now, perhaps he senses that the world is on the cusp of a new era. Some of his siblings appear to have taken physical form once more, their cults of followers growing restless and aggressive. The Freljord itself is fractured and leaderless, and ancient horrors are lurking in the shadows, waiting for any opportunity to strike. In the blood of the feed and hand of the ruined problems. In the wars to come, and in their aftermath, Ornn knows that the Freljord and the rest of Runeterra will have need of a good blacksmith. Sejuani. The Winter's Wrath. Sejuani was the child of a Freljordian political marriage that ended as coldly as it began. Her mother, the iceborn warrior Kalkia of the Winter's Claw, abandoned her new family to pursue the man who had captured her heart years before, and the tribe fell into decline and chaos without a young Warmhother to lead it. Sejuani was instead raised by her grandmother, Hejian. Though Sejuani tried her best to earn Hejian's love, she was never able to meet her arduous expectations. As the tribe's troubles grew in the years that followed, Hejian had even less time for the girl. Wealth, love, safety, these were things Sejuani only experienced secondhand, through visits to the Winter's Claw's sister tribe, the Avarosans. During the summers, Gnar, the most famous warrior in the region, took Sejuani into her household. After discovering Gnar had in fact once bested Kalkia in a duel, the Avarosan Warmother instantly became Sejuani's idol, and Grana's daughter Ashe became the only person she ever truly considered a friend. After Gnar questioned the treatment of the young girl by her grandmother and affronted Hejian cut all ties with the Avarosans. The Winter's Claw then instigated a series of conflicts with other neighboring tribes, attempting to reclaim the lands and honor they had lost with Kalkia's flight. But these desperate tactics only led them further into ruin. Somehow, word of this reached Kalkia. Hearing of her former tribe's misfortunes, she returned and took up the man's heart and cart. Whoa! Even so, quelling these hostilities left the Winter's Claw with gain-poor lands and precious few other resources, forcing them to rely on the grim Frostard for protection. Sejuani was galled by this, and resolved to seize leadership from her mother. She swore a sacred oath to lead a perilous raid against a Noxian warship, hoping that fulfilling this oath would be enough to rally the tribe to her, with enough support to wrest power from Kalkia and the Frost Priests. During the vicious assault, Sejuani freed a juvenile Druvask from the ship's butchery stores, naming it Bristle for the feel of its hide. Though she could not have guessed it at the time, this creature would grow to become one of the largest Druvasks ever seen, and remained with Sejuani as her loyal steed. Her raid a success, Sejuani decided it was time to challenge her mother directly for the tribe. By the ancient customs, a duel between a mother and her daughter was unthinkable, but Sejuani would not be deterred. Outraged, the Frost Priests were forced to intervene, and Kalkia died in the struggle before Sejuani could reach her. As the new War Mother of the Winter's Claw, Sejuani began attacking and absorbing nearby tribes, consolidating her power and gathering a veritable horde of followers. Her defiance of the Frost Guard also attracted outcast shamans, spirit walkers, iceborn and stormborn, and unrepentant worshippers of all the old gods from across the Freljord. Where once they had been weak, disgraced, and preyed upon by their neighbors, in only a few years, the Winter's Claw had become feared throughout the Northlands for their speed, brutality, and absolute devotion to their War Mother. Now, as the seasons turn, Sejuani marches on the southern tribes, Noxian interlopers, and even the borderlands of Demacia, raiding, pillaging, and conquering any who stand against her. Ultimately, she seeks to cast down and destroy the burgeoning coalition of tribes formed by her childhood friend, Ashe. As far as Sejuani is concerned, the Avarosan War Mother has betrayed not only their friendship, but far worse, she has also betrayed Grenna's legacy. And so, Sejuani will prove that only she is worthy of ruling the Freljord. Trundle, the Troll King. Trolls are, for the most part, hulking and brutish creatures, found in many of Runeterra's least hospitable environments. Though not invulnerable, they are blessed with a hardy constitution and the ability to heal more quickly than other mortal races, especially the feeble humans. This means they can endure extremes of climate and scarce resources merely by out-survive. In the construction of climate, they carry out their side, I know you, not me. I know you, not me. Freljord is a lot for me. Trundle was whelped in a filthy cave, along with a brood of 15 brothers and sisters. Times were particularly hard, so that only 7 of them grew strong enough to join the ranks of their chieftain's warband. And only 3 remained after their first winter of raiding. As the warband feasted, the chieftain spoke of his intention to circle back and raid the same lands again. All would fear them. It would get easier every time. Frowning, Trundle stood up and said this plan was no good. The people they had crushed had nothing left for the tribe to take. They should return next winter when the granaries were full again, and the livestock grown big enough to make more than a single mouthful. Many of the other trolls did not like this at all. They ground their teeth and thumped the sides of their heads, trying to comprehend what Trundle was suggesting. Was he a coward? Had the cold got into his brain and turned it to slush? The chieftain beat Trundle with a rock and threw him away down the mountainside. Fools had no place in his warband. Trundle wandered far, for he knew he would not be welcome anywhere nearby. He avoided other troll tribes scattered across the tundra, and was careful to keep his distance from the feral yetis that roamed the highlands. By night, he gazed up at the stars and remembered all the stories he had been told as a pup. Legends of Grubgrak the Wise and other ancient troll kings, who followed the old gods and were gifted powerful weapons as symbols of their right to rule the world. Eventually, Trundle came to a great crack in the ground. While he was glad to be out of the wind, he soon found himself lost in a maze of twisted, howling canyons, that seemed to sink deeper beneath the Freljord than the mountains rose above it. And at the very bottom of that abyss, he met the Ice Witch. She waited for him on a shimmering, frozen lake, surrounded by little human warriors skinned in furs and metal. Trundle was not daunted by any of this, but the Ice Witch wanted to know how he had found his way here, into the very heart of her domain, and how he was able to walk upon her lake. Trundle looked down. The ice beneath his feet was darker than the night sky, far overhead. It made his brain want to squirm around inside his skull. The Ice Witch told him he was special, something called Iceborn, which meant he should stay there with her. But Trundle did not want this, and told her how he had been cast out by the chieftain, and that he wanted to find a great weapon and become a troll king like Grubrak and all the others. To his surprise, the Ice Witch agreed, and handed him a mighty club of ice called Bone Shiver. With this, he could become king of all trolls, and form a great alliance with her human tribe. He eagerly agreed, and began the long journey home. When Trundle arrived, the chieftain laughed in his face, until Trundle bashed him over the head with Bone Shiver. In an instant, the old troll was frozen solid by the club's icy magic, and a second blow shattered his body into tiny pieces. Awed by Trundle's newfound strength, the rest of the warband listened to his tale of the Ice Witch and the alliance she had promised. Trundle was smart. Trundle had been chosen to wield great power. Trundle would be their king. And with Trundle leading the charge, the time of the trolls is surely coming. Tryndamere, the barbarian king, infuser. Tryndamere came into the world knowing only the harshness of survival, for the frozen steppes where his clan made their home never truly thawed. Though they praised all the Freljord's old gods, as well as the cult of the Three, they prayed most often to a spirit deity known to ravage the tundra, a hearty and unkillable Tusklord. Since the raw materials required for armor were scarce, the clan instead put its resources toward the forging of great blades, inspired by their god's ivory canines. The stamina and dueling prowess of Tryndamere's people became legendary. They were able to fend off other raiding tribes, slay the great beasts of the mountains, and repel Noxians encroaching to the south. Tryndamere himself grew to be a brash and formidable warrior, but it wasn't until a particularly cruel midwinter night that his strength was truly tested. An unusual storm swept in from the east, bringing with it an icy darkness and a towering horned figure silhouetted against the full moon. Some in the clan knelt, believing that their bull god stood among them. This creature dripped with ancient magic, true enough, but he was not of the Freljord, and those that knelt were the first to die. Tryndamere looked on in horror. He could feel unhinged brutality rising in his heart at the sight of the invader's cruel, living sword. Whether taken by bloodlust or some other madness, Tryndamere raised his own blade and let out a defiant roar. The dark figure swatted him aside like an insect. Tryndamere lay surrounded by the dead, in snow-soaked, almost black with blood. He drew what he thought would be his last breaths as the preacher approached and spoke. Tryndamere tried to hold on to the strange, archaic words, but as his life force slipped away, it was the thing's laughter that burned itself into the young warrior's memory. For Tryndamere did not die that night. He was revived by a rage unlike anything he had ever experienced. He looked to the eastern horizon, intent on avenging not only the destruction of his clan, but the desecration of his own martial pride. However, retribution was not what the steppes offered him. There were survivors, and they would not be long for this world if Tryndamere could not find others to shelter them. There were Noxians to the south, Frostguard to the north, and the dark figure had come from the east. To the west, it was said that some tribes were gathering before the supposed reincarnation of Avarosa. Once, he might have dismissed such fanciful rumors, but now he knew this was his only recourse. Tryndamere and the remnants of his people arrived in the valley as little more than beggars. The young warrior was determined to show his clan's worth and win them the Avarosan leader's protection so that he could return to thoughts of revenge. Brandishing his tusked sword, he did what came naturally and challenged others to duels. Holding the image of the dark figure and its echoing laughter in his mind, Tryndamere quickly bested anyone who stepped forward. His singular fury was deeply unsettling to the Avarosans. The northern warriors too noted his rapid healing between bouts, unlike the Iceborn that walked among them. The more Tryndamere gave in to his rage, the more quickly his body healed. Many suspected he and his clan practiced strange and unnatural magics, and so Tryndamere's plan to prove his worth was now endangering the wider acceptance of his people. But not all of the Avarosans had turned against him. Their war mother, Ashe, was looking to strengthen her position with a political marriage to someone who could face down the endless challenges for her hand and to her rule. Seeing an opportunity in the handsome barbarian, she pledged to take in his clan as Avarosans if Tryndamere became her first and only bloodsworn. As he spent more time in Ashe's company, he began to believe what others had whispered, that she was indeed the divine reincarnation of Avarosa herself. His rage found temperance in her thoughtful leadership, and a genuine affection grew between them. Even so, serving as Ashe's champion, Tryndamere now looks to an uncertain future. The barbarian king can see war brewing all too clearly on the Freljord's horizon, yet he still thirsts for his own personal vengeance, and begins to wonder if his predestined fate might not be at his queen's side after all. Udyr, the spirit walker. Whenever the moon rises into a wintry sky, round and red as blood, the spirit walkers of the Freljord know that another of their kind has been born into the world. One attuned to the wilds and the land, one who walks within and beside the spirit that best matches the shape of their heart. On the night of Udyr's birth, there was nothing in the crimson moon that suggested anything different than that. Nothing that would suggest Udyr was already the most powerful walker to ever live. Every the spiritual that was not his power, his spirit of bytimes in The needs and wants of everything around him constantly flooded his mind, making it impossible to hear anything above their roar. The first time Udyr tapped into his powers with purpose was the night the Frostguard came for him. Young Udyr, terrified, hid in the forest. He did not expect to feel the life ripped from everyone. His entire tribe, slaughtered in an instant. Howling with sadness and rage, Udyr took power from the spirits of the forest. With a swipe of his claws and a beating of his wings, he brought the mountain down on the Frostguard. Alone, grieving and overwhelmed, Udyr wandered the wastes for years, doing what he had to in order to survive. He did not interact with humans again until he landed the killing blow on a wildclaw that was troubling a Winter's Claw hunting party. Impressed, they brought Udyr back to camp. All-Mother Hijan sent him to be trained in the ways of war alongside her daughter Kalkia. The wild boy showed the lonely daughter how to live in the wild, and she showed him how to live among people. Soon, the Winter's Claw began to almost feel like a home. But that changed when a pack of starved and diseased Rimefang wolves skulked close to the camp. Udyr lost himself in the fog of the pack's madness and hunger, attacking and nearly killing a child. It took Kalkia and her mother's true ice to stop Udyr. After the wolves had all been slain, Hijan banished Udyr from the Winter's Claw. Udyr returned to the mountains, far from those he could hurt. Kalkia would visit whenever she could get away, until she was eventually called upon to lead her tribe. She joyfully lifted Udyr's banishment, but he refused to return. He still had no control over the spirits whose wants and needs howled inside his mind, but swore he would always be there to protect Kalkia and the people she loved. That was the last time they saw one another. Everything changed when a foreign monk sought him out, saying he had come to train with the spirit walkers so that he may learn how to subdue the dragon spirit that burned within him. Udyr refused, but the monk challenged Udyr for the right to train with him. They fought to their limits, but in the end, neither won. The monk introduced himself as Lee Sin and said that this battle had shown him they both had much to learn. He invited Udyr to train in his homeland of Ionia. With nothing left to tie him to the Freljord, Udyr agreed. The two men grew close during their journey, taking time each day to spar together and to speak of the spirits. But when they finally arrived at Hirana Monastery, they found it besieged by Noxian invaders. Calling upon the spirits of Ionia, Udyr leapt into the fray. After their victory, the two men asked the abbot for guidance and how to learn control. The abbot told them that self-mastery had no guaranteed end, but agreed to train them both. For the first time, Udyr's mind was quiet enough for him to hear his own thoughts. He and Lee trained together to master the spirits within and beside them. With new knowledge and understanding, Udyr was able to help Lee and his dragon find balance with one another. And through this endeavor, Udyr came to understand as life and cell seemed to be frightened by heavenly right. After several years, Udyr's powers plateaued. He was faced with the choice to stay and train in Ionia, or return to the struggle of his homeland, where he could continue his growth. In the end, the choice was obvious. Lee gave Udyr one of his blindfolds to keep with him, a reminder of his commitment to self-mastery, and asked for a promise. That, once Udyr had achieved what he was looking for in the Freljord, he would return the blindfold to Lee in person. Udyr wrapped the blindfold around his hand before setting off across the world once again to take up the mantle of Spirit Walker. A new conflict between an Avarosan and Winter's Claw Warmother greeted Udyr upon his return to the Freljord. The Avarosan wanted to unite the people of the Freljord under a single banner, putting an end to their struggles. Udyr understood that such an action would harm the spirit of the land, and so he decided to offer counsel to the other side, the Winter's Claw. It was Kaukir's headstrong daughter, Sejuani, who received him, and he could feel her need for guidance. The young woman accepted Udyr's help, but Sejuani's trust was hard won, for she had grown up hearing tales of the Spirit Walker and his bloodlust. Udyr came to appreciate Sejuani's drive and cleverness, though her ruthlessness worried him. Sejuani saw wisdom and a warrior's heart in Udyr, but his frequent absences grated her nerves. In time, they came to view one another like family, a surrogate oath father and daughter, though they would never say it aloud. Before long, the other spirit walkers summoned Udyr down to the south. But fate intervened when he met a strange old woman in an enormous coat. She asked for his help with several impossible tasks that he inevitably failed. Entertained by his attempts, she rewarded his efforts with bread so salty that he choked, and water so cold that his veins turned to ice. The old woman laughed at his reaction and shrugged off her coat, and the spiritual power hit Udyr like an avalanche. He passed out and woke alone, but he could feel something had changed within him. A new power had awakened. He didn't realize it, but the Seal Sister, in one of her many disguises, had tested Udyr and given him her blessing. Still the 1,000, were through, they raft, that are causes. Other believed that it was the Avarosans, in their efforts to unite the Freljord, that was causing this pain. He told the other spirit walkers as much, and asked them to fight against the Avarosan advance, alongside the Winter's Claw. Many were skeptical, but others, afraid that Udyr might be right, agreed. With his new spiritual power flowing within him, Udyr raced back to the Winter's Claw to help end this existential threat to the Freljord once and for all. Volibear, the relentless storm. To some, he is the thunder's roar, the great storm, or Valhyr. To others, he is ruin, the 1,000-pierced bear, or he who stands. But to most of the tribes who still hold to the old ways, he is known as the Volibear. Destruction, strength, and the storm made manifest. The Volibear represents the unstoppable power and fury of the Freljord itself. It was the Volibear and his demigod kin who formed the land they called Freljord long before the arrival of the mortal races. The tall Giardals tell Veth, the 180 Venten Gate, when the Volibear finally felled the beast, its blood became the first river in the Freljord, and its colossal corpse formed the Wormback Mountains. In the days of the first tribes, wild magic ran rampant. The Volibear was venerated and worshipped by all, for they needed his indomitable strength to survive. Great wars were waged, and the Volibear took to the field alongside his followers, clad in rune-inscribed armor made by his brother Orn, demigod of the Forge. At the Volibear is not got for to the next battle, dying the Lost of Oath battle row, from set held. 155 seconds, the Dian Pollock assistant. In time, the Volibear and his kin drifted apart, each focusing on their own pursuits. Even so, there was no true division between them, until new ideas began to usurp the old beliefs. Three Freer rose. A few, like Anivia, seemed inclined to work with the sisters, while the Volibear and the Iron Boar wanted to destroy them. Others would have been content to ignore them completely, since these feeble creatures would eventually die like all before them. The Volibear looked to the most animalistic and savage of his followers, known as the Urzine. With them, he would defeat the three sisters. In preparation, he sought out Orn to arm his warriors for battle, but Orn refused. He did not approve of the Urzine's savage ways, and a terrible fight erupted between the two demigods. In the aftermath, the Volibear cursed his brother's name and cast off his rune-inscribed armor. He would fight from then on with just tooth and claw and might and thunder. Far from being lessened, the Volibear found his full power was now unleashed. With newfound rage, he confronted one of the mortal sisters who sought to steal the power of the demigods for herself. Before her entire army, he struck her down, blinding her, but he was unable to stop what she had already set in motion. As the centuries rolled by, and despite the Volibear's resistance, tribes began to venerate and worship the three sisters instead. Many of the more ancient practices were forgotten. He saw tribes cowering behind stone walls rather than face the rawness of nature. He saw fields being tilled and farmers herding cattle rather than hunting. He bellowed in fury to see great rivers dammed rather than be allowed to roar free. This was not his Freljord. The change had happened slowly, glacially, but the Volibear finally came to realize that the tribes had been cut off from the wild spirit of the land, making them frail, compliant, and soft. These weaklings had no reverence for the old ways or old gods. Anger and determination rumbled within him. He vowed to tear down all evidence of civilization and return the Freljord to its ancient state as a true wilderness. The people would become strong once more. He would again be honored and feared by all. As the call of the Volibear reverberates across the mountains and plains of the north, more and more Freljordians are responding. Slowly, the old ways are being remembered and re-embraced, and his strength grows with each new follower. A reckoning of blood awaits, and the Volibear is rushing toward it.